We good?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry about those technical difficulties, folks. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Tammy Scott. I'm the Field Operations Director with the Office of Childcare. And I want to take a moment and have our panelists introduce themselves. Aaron, you want to go first?
Hi, I'm Aaron Rayna. I'm an administrative support staff with the community systems team, and I'm mainly operating in a role as technical support for this meeting.
Great, thanks, Aaron. Catherine?
Hi, I'm Catherine Miller, and I am a regional manager for the Office of Child Care up out of the Portland office.
And Ellie, you are not showing your camera right now. There you are.
Oh, you're on mute, Ellie.
There you go.
Of course. I'm Ellie Katara. I'm the regional manager for the Salem area.
So Ellie is going to be monitoring the Q&A box for us today and feeding questions. Catherine and Ellie are both going to help me with answering questions, and Catherine's going to write down any questions that we aren't able to answer today so that we can get back to you on that. We are using, there's a Q&A ability within Zoom, so when you have questions, go ahead and enter them there. I'm not going to promise that I'm going to have all the answers, but we'll write down what we don't know the answers to, and hopefully we'll get to all your questions in this hour. We're going to spend the majority of the time with you asking the questions. I am going to do a few slides to begin with some frequently asked questions that I've already received, so that maybe if that was your burning question, we'll cover it right up front. I expect that'll take about 15 minutes, and then about the last 45 minutes will be all for you guys. So we are going to first talk about what available resources that the Early Learning Division has been working on for the August 14th updated guidelines. We are posting videos on our website. If you go onto our website, there's this For Providers button with a green arrow that's purple. You click into that, and then just below that, if you scroll down a little bit, there's Health and Safety Guideline video series. We're making videos for all of the 14 topics to support your understanding, because I know, and I watched all the videos this morning, I know I read it all, but it really helped me to listen to it then, and it really helped cement that information in for me. So we hope that you guys take the time and watch those videos. I think you'll find them to be really helpful. Another thing, and we're also posting those videos in English and in Spanish.
Tammy, I would say too, I had checked at noon, maybe only about half of them are up so far.
That's correct. Yep, I've watched, I would say, about 7 of the 14. We're making them every day and posting them as they get completed. Other resources that we're working on is I have been collecting FAQ questions, really going back to when we did the initial round of calls with providers, when we were introducing what the guidance was going to be saying. I went through the entire chat log, pulled out questions from that. I've drafted FAQs, and we're going to be posting those on our website. They're in the final stages of revisions now, so be checking our website regularly for answers to those questions that you have posed previously. In addition, we are going to be hosting additional calls coming up the following weeks. Next week, it's actually going to be in a small group discussion format, so we'll be able to break down in smaller groups and actually have a two-way conversation. And then we're also, as a division, working on a lot of support documents to post on our website and provide to childcare programs to support them in their implementation. We're working on documents such as a checklist for you to use on who you need to contact when there's been a confirmed case, updated attendance records, a health check form that you can use in the morning, a document to support understanding on the PPE requirements, support documents to help children with mask wearing, and we're updating our exclusion documents. So all of those things are in the process now and are going to be posted in the next couple weeks, along with the template for the health and safety plan. So keep checking our website, because we're going to be getting things rolling through as we get them through translation. Okay, so we're going to go through, do a few questions that I know have been burning for a lot of people, and then we'll get to your questions. So some general questions that I've been receiving is, if a county moves back into phasing, what will the grace period be to reduce their slots down? And right now, I do want to just mention the only time that you're going to have to reduce down to 10 is if your county goes into baseline phase. Right now, there is no county as of today that is in baseline phase, But if that does happen, there will be a grace period, and we're working with the Oregon Health Authority to determine what that would look like. So it's not going to be that the next day you would have to reduce your slots from 12 down to 10 or 20 down to 10 if you're a center, or if you're a CF 16 down to 10. There will be some adjustment period, but hopefully nobody will get into baseline because we're all doing so great with our mask wearing and our social distancing. Another question, what is the responsibility of the provider to ensure school agers attend school? There is no regulatory requirement to ensure that they're completing their distance learning. You are not required to provide computers or internet. This should be something that you're working with parents to agree upon ahead of time so that everyone has the same understanding. But from our side, from a regulatory perspective, there is no requirement. Okay. So now we're going to do a few questions on drop off and pickup. So we're hearing, what if, now that drop off and pickup has to happen outside of the facility, unless you're a CF or RF and you're the only staff on site, we're getting questions about what happens if a parent is late or they come in the middle of the day and no one's at the entrance to receive the child. So what you're going to want to do with your families is plan ahead of time, have a phone number set up where they will contact you if they're not going to arrive at the normal drop off and pickup time, so that you can make arrangements and have somebody at the door to greet them. A lot of centers that we're hearing are concerned about some of the outdoor drop off and pickup due to hazards and busy streets, and that could also be a factor with registered family and certified family also. Are there any accommodations for this? So the guidelines around drop off and pickup are really in place to minimize the possible spread of disease. If you have a situation that is just really out of the ordinary, consult with your licensing specialist and we'll problem solve it with you to see if there's any options. Okay, a few health check questions we've been getting. Some parents have a preference about how their child's temperature is taken. So if a parent wants to use a different sort of temperature taking device, are they allowed to do that? Right now, the requirements say that the facility needs to designate a staff person that'll take that temperature. So the parent can take the temperature as long as they do it in front of you and you can see the results of that temperature. The goal of this rule was that the provider is able to verify the temperature. So if it's the parent that takes it on their own temperature taking device, or you taking it with what you have, both of them meet the goal. Okay, group size question. This question has come up quite a bit. When children return to school, they're going to have a stable group at school and a different stable group at childcare. Is this allowed? Yes, it is allowed. And although it's not ideal that children are in multiple groups throughout the day, it's not expected for childcare to be able to mimic the school stable group. So you're going to have your stable group at childcare, and it is going to have children from different groups during the day. Okay, a couple questions that I've received about personal protective equipment. Is there money available to help with PPE? And what I can tell you is the ELD is working on additional grants for childcare programs who received a grant in round one and round two. And any money that we want to allocate, it has to go through the legislature and the governor's office. So it's not something that we can just make that decision. It does have an approval process, so we're working on that. We're also working on finding a vendor that providers would be able to access supplies at a discounted price. So I'm hoping that that comes through sooner rather than later. What if the child refuses to wear a face covering? Very common question I'm getting. And the advice that we're giving is do the best you can. Work with the parents. We're working on a technical assistance support document that can help with that. Make it a game with children, do funny faces in a mirror, work with the parents to help them understand that it's about protecting our friends. But ultimately, if a child refuses to, they should not be disciplined in any way. So another question, what if the parent refuses to wear it at drop off and pickup? And this really is a requirement at drop off and pickup that parents do have to wear a face covering. So part of the guidance from August 14th is that you're informing your parents about the requirements. So one of the requirements would be informing them about the drop off and pickup protocols, communicate with the parents, try to address their barriers. But ultimately, if they're refusing to wear a mask or a face covering, then emergency childcare might not be the best option for them if they're unwilling to comply with safety measures that are meant to protect other families. You're required to follow the rules, and if they can't support you in that, then they might have to find another option or have somebody else do the drop off or pick up for them. Okay, question about outer layers. So right now, today is for certified family and registered family. And so for health checks, you do not have to have a outer layer on for your health check. What you do have to have is a long sleeve outer layer for your infant feeding. That outer layer needs to be big enough to fully cover your front, so it could be a sheet. It could be a large receiving blanket. It could be a long sleeve shirt. But for each infant that gets fed, they should have a clean outer layer. And if that outer layer is soiled in any way, then it needs to be changed and not used again. But you can use the same outer layer for the same infant multiple times in a day. Okay, daily activities. So are we asking providers to not allow children to play with each other? No, we know children are going to play with each other. We know that 3-year-olds are not going to socially distance or physically distance. What we're asking is that you do your best to limit the sharing of materials as much as possible. You know, have individual bins for each of the children so they have their pile of blocks and they're not sharing them amongst themselves as much as you can. And then after the materials are used, clean the materials before they're used again. And if children do share materials, have them wash their hands or use hand sanitizer afterwards. But I don't know how you would run a childcare without having children playing together. Okay, cleaning and building maintenance. What does it mean in the guidance when it says to clean the sinks and faucets after each use? Does this mean after a stable group uses it, as opposed to after each child within the stable group? After each use is referring to the stable group using that sink. And in family childcare, you probably are just going to have one stable group. So when the group is done, disinfect the sink. You don't have to do it after each individual child. Okay, so responding to possible COVID cases. This was a big switch in this guidance. Actually, yes, this one. So can a child or staff return to care if they have COVID sort of symptoms, if they have a doctor's note? So if they have a fever and a cough, are they able to return to care with a doctor's note stating that it's not COVID? The person can return to care with a doctor's note and be fever-free for 24 hours without the use of fever-reducing medicines. Previously, they had to be excluded for 10 full days. And the fever might be due to teething or due to an ear infection. So now with a doctor's note, once the fever's been gone for 24 hours, they can return to care. And with a negative test, they also can return to care 24 hours after the cough and fever have reduced have resolved without the use of fever-reducing medicines. Okay, just one more slide of things I've been hearing, and then we'll get to your questions. Whoops, went too far. Maybe not. No, that is it. That's it. So now we're going to go ahead and get to your questions. And like I said, I'll do the best I can. And if I don't know the answer, Ellie and Catherine might jump in. And if none of us know, we'll write it down and work on it and look at getting it posted on our FAQ. Also, if it's a question that we are not able to respond to, if you want to put your email in the Q&A next to your question, if we say we don't know the answer, we could also email you back with a response once we've nailed it down. So Ellie, let's go ahead and open it up.
Yeah. So one participant indicated that they're concerned that they only have a small group and only one child who's over the age of 5, who's attended all summer with her sibling. Are there any exceptions to the age rule regarding kids wearing masks?
Yeah, you know, right now I'm not aware of any exceptions to that. I know I did receive this question yesterday from a licensing specialist, and I can tell you that I put it on a list of questions that I'm taking up the chain, but right now I'm not aware of any, but I am taking that forward.
Thank you. Under what parameters do you anticipate rolling back the emergency care requirements? Because information is constantly changing.
Yeah, what I can tell you is the ELD, Oregon Health Authority and Governor's Office are really watching, what's happening with the virus. There's new studies coming out constantly, new science occurring, new discoveries with who it's affecting more and less. So I would say that I don't know, actually, I don't know the answer of what would cause us to change the requirements, but I don't see it happening anytime soon. I think we need to see that the virus is much more under control in Oregon before that would be considered.
Are schools who are talking about opening up childcare having to follow the same rules and regulations as other licensed care?
So it depends. The answer depends on who's running the school or who's running the program. So if the program is ran by the school, so the school district is running the childcare, they do have to follow the guidelines that were put out on August 14th. What they don't have to do is be licensed in order to do it, because as another governmental agency, they are exempt, but they do have to follow all of the guidelines. If the school is partnering with child care such as the YMCA to come in and provide that care, then that program would have to either be licensed or approved as emergency child care unlicensed and follow all the same guidance. So yes, any program operating within a school, regardless of who's running it, does have to follow all the guidelines that came out on August 14th.
In the new guidance, it says that providers need to come up with a COVID-19 plan. Can providers just highlight the ELD requirements, or do they have to come up with a different plan outside of what's already provided in the guidance?
Yeah, so we are working on a template, and I can tell you I saw a sneak peek to the template yesterday. And really the template is very focused on each of the requirements in the guidelines and how you're going to implement it. So you're going to need to put out program-specific elements, how you're going to relay the information, how you're going to support your staff if you have staff to know that. So it isn't just highlighting what we're already requiring, but really how you're going to implement it. Who's going to be responsible for verifying, for cleaning the sink after a group of children use it? Or who's going to be responsible for conducting the daily health check? Just a little bit more detail about how it's actually going to be implemented in your own program.
Thank you. During drop-off and pickup, if there's inclement weather, can they come inside the facility to complete their health check?
I'll tell you that's, we had the implement weather question that I had a couple questions back. And I would say I need to take that one forward about, what's going to happen when you're in Central Oregon and there's a couple feet of snow. So I'm going to take that one back. And Catherine, if you could write that down, because I do think that we need to have some discussions about what that would look like.
Okay. At what age are children required to wear face masks or face shields?
They are required when they are kindergarten age, is what the guidance currently says. And I'll tell you that we're having a slight debate right now about whether that kindergarten age means that they are enrolled in kindergarten by their parents, or whether it means that they are eligible. And I anticipate that we'll have an answer to that very early next week, and we will post it on our FAQ for sure, whether it's the eligible to be enrolled or actually enrolled, and we'll have that nailed down next week early.
What do you do if an employee refuses to wear a mask?
Then they can't be employed. They can't work in their position. They are required to, unless they have a medical condition and a doctor's note relieving them from it, then they are not allowed to be working.
If you've not received Grant 1 or Grant 2, are you able to apply for future grants?
Oh, good question. I actually don't know the answer to that one. The answer that I put in the FAQ that I already put out very specifically talked about that the third round of grants were going to be for first and second round recipients, but I actually am not super in the grant loop. So we're going to have to write down that question and add it to the FAQs online. So keep an eye out for it.
Okay. If drop off and pickup is done outside and 6 feet is maintained, do parents still have to wear a mask?
They do. I mean, the guidance says that during drop off and pickup, they do have to wear a mask. So that is required. Or a face covering. A mask, when we refer to mask, we're referring to actually a medical grade. So face coverings would be, the typical cloth masks that we're seeing, or the face shields.
Okay. Does infant only mean under 1 or under 2, or only when holding a child to feed or when helping children to feed themselves?
Good question. I would say what infant is referring to is any child in the rules. Infant is defined as 12 months and under in registered family and certified family. And it's when they're bottle feeding. So an infant that is sitting in a high chair that you're spoon feeding, you don't have to wear the covering. So it's when you're bottle feeding a baby.
What is the best way of sanitizing infants' hands prior to entering the building?
Good question. You know what? I'm going to defer to Catherine. Do you have any thoughts on this one? You're muted.
I really don't, because hand sanitizer is not recommended for infants. So I think we would probably want to ask. I'm almost thinking even just, like the baby wipes, I think that's what I would be inclined to say.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think we're going to have to take that forward. And what I'll tell you is, the guidelines that are there now, we're receiving feedback on them and already discussing some adjustments that need made. Excuse me. Sorry, I also have a dog at my door that's scratching and whining at me, so I'm trying to ignore that. So we're going to take some of these questions forward when we say, well, how do you do that with an infant? And I think with an infant, what you're going to do is you're going to carry them inside for right now. Carry them inside, take them to a sink, wash their little hands, because we don't use hand sanitizer on infants. But I think that that's a very good question to take forward.
Great. One provider has school-age children that have been doing helper jobs. Can they still help out, like lunch helper, snack helper, table cleaner?
Are they school-age children that are enrolled in the program? I think I need a little more information. Let's go ahead and have that person put in a little more detail for me, and then we'll come back to that question.
Okay. If the provider's children refuse to use a mask in their own house, are there exceptions for that?
We always say that you can submit an exception to anything. I'd be surprised if that got approved. They don't have to wear masks at all times. They only have to wear them when they are in the childcare area and during childcare hours. So if they're in their bedroom, or you have another den where they're at, they don't have to wear it then, only in the childcare area.
Okay. What is do we need consent forms signed by the parents in order for their child to use hand sanitizer?
You do not need consent forms, but it's not a bad idea to have that discussion with parents. Part of your training parents on the COVID guidelines is having those discussions and letting them know that we're using hand sanitizers more regularly. We're using it if children have shared toys. We're using it when we walk in the morning if we don't have a hand washing sink right away. So making sure that they're aware that that is a common thing that's going to happen throughout the day, but you don't have to have a written form.
Thank you. How are you supposed to keep children 3 feet apart in the car when you watch 6 children if they go back to school?
Very good question, and I'll tell you that we're taking that one back to OHA for further guidance and looking at, because that's a very good question if you're not using a bus or a 15-passenger van. So we're taking that one forward.
Okay. I'm just scrolling because some of them are repeats. Parents are asking me if their child has to wear a mask during online school in front of their screen. And I've also had this question, Tammy, and so I'll just add to it. If the children are 6 feet apart indoors and have their own work space.
I think we're going to have to take that one forward. I think what distance learning looks like is going to be a good question. So Catherine, would you write that one down, and we'll take that forward.
Okay. What if someone has a doctor's note to not wear a mask? Will parents still need to wear them?
So, I mean, if your staff or you or your children have a doctor's reason to not wear a mask, that's something that the guidelines allow for. And I just, I'm kind of just thinking out loud when we think about people out in the world right now, those that have a medical condition don't have to wear one. There is an exemption for that. Let's take that one forward too. I don't want to venture a guess and then give you guys wrong information. So we're going to take that one forward. My gut says if they have a medical reason and can verify it, they wouldn't need to, but I need to check on that.
There are a lot of rules to follow for a provider who's doing this on their own and trying to follow those rules 100% of the time. Is there any grace if we can't do it all?
I think you bring up a really good point. It feels like to all of you and to all of us, like we're having to learn a whole new rule book every few months, and it's hard, and we recognize that it's hard. We recognize that it's hard for you, that it's hard for our staff, and so we are certainly not going to walk in and say, oh, you're feeding a baby and your hair's long and you don't have it pulled back in a ponytail. We're going to work with you and support you if we see things that we see as missing. If it's something really serious, like you are not keeping stable groups, that would be a problem. We would cite you for that. But for some of the other things, we're certainly going to do our best to support you through them because we recognize that this is all very, very hard. And when you're working by yourself, it's very hard.
We've talked about the fact that children who are kindergarten age and up need to wear a mask. Do they need to wear a mask all day and in all settings?
So the rules do give, some opportunities to not. Obviously, when they're eating, they're not going to wear a mask. If anybody's sleeping, then they don't wear a mask. Or if they're outside and can maintain 6 feet distance, then no face covering is required. Other than that, it is required. And I know how hard face coverings are. And I was at the store the other day and looking around at everybody and looking at the clerks who are working, 9-10 hours a day. And it's now just becoming such a part of our society. It's, whoever thought we'd be here. And so it is going to be an adjustment at first, but with time, like most things, we'll all get used to it.
Does a 7-year-old need to wear a mask if they want to rest on a nap mat during the day, but they aren't actually sleeping?
I don't know. That's hard. The requirement is if they are sleeping, they don't have to. So I would say if they're just resting, then they probably need to leave the mask on because they're not actually sleeping.
Okay. Some school-age kiddos will be coming 1 day a week, and the other 4 days they will be going in childcare. So they are in one provider stable group and then exposed to all the other school kids, and we're still in compliance based on your earlier answer, correct?
Correct. Yep, there's only so much you can do. You just need to have your group be stable. You can't really control what happens when they leave your group.
I'm not sure I understand this question, but I want to pose it in case one of you do. Are we required to have media note on file? Maybe it was medical note.
Medical is my guess. So yes, if you have a child or a staff person that can't comply with the mask, then just put the doctor's note in their file. Keep it confidential. The doctor's note doesn't even have to say what their diagnosis is. It just has to indicate that mask wearing is not appropriate for them and put it in their file.
Okay. I see a question about whether or not people are able to open new locations now.
They are. We began licensing new programs, about 3 or 4 weeks ago. In some parts of the state, we are still doing those visits completely virtual. In some parts of the state, we're doing a hybrid version so that we're trying to do as much as possible over the phone, so then our time spent in your home is just very quick, in and out fast, but we are opening new programs now.
Okay. Let's see. Some of these were answered live, so.
Good.
Can siblings be allowed to not socially distance without masks when outside?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know an answer to that one. Siblings are the one group that if they're, for example, if they're in a center and they're in different groups during the day, that they could join groups together. So siblings, they're obviously already having contact with each other. I think where you would really struggle though is that these two children here don't have to stay 6 feet apart, but the rest of everybody else does. I think that would be pretty hard to manage. I think if you only had those siblings in care, I think that would be reasonable outside. But if you have other children, I think it's going to be pretty hard. And I think consistency with what the requirements are is going to be best for all the children involved.
What protective equipment will ELD licensors be required to wear to enter my home? Will they have their own PPE? Will they be required to use our sink or require us to use our hand sanitizer?
So good question. We have provided our staff with masks and gloves that are required, hand sanitizer so that they have it with them at all times. So they should be using their own sanitizer, their own pens. They're going to come masked up. They're going to have gloves on. Some of them might even have a gown and booties depending on their comfort level.
Thank you. Parents are having a hard time when asking doctors for a letter for child not to wear a mask in care. Doctors don't know all about the new rules, and I think I just wanted to share that comment because there isn't really a question in there, but I wanted to note that we understand that we're all learning, including the medical field, about what is best for recommendations. If your child doesn't have a diagnosis that would make it difficult for them to wear a mask, I'm sure that doctors are having a hard time answering those questions, and we do appreciate that. When will we see licensing in person again, and what will that look like?
So right now, Catherine, do you want to take this question?
Sure. So again, I think it's really going to depend. As Tammy kind of mentioned earlier, we're doing actually coming out on complaints. We have investigative specialists, so they are for the most part doing those. When needed, if it's really serious, they are coming in person. And then we have started in-person visits where it's appropriate. So for the time being, with renewing programs or programs we've already seen, we're really still trying to do those virtually unless there's a real need to go. Partly because, we want to keep your program safe. Our staff travel from place to place, and we don't, want to be, carrying the virus anywhere, and everybody's comfort level is different. New programs we're trying to do them with a hybrid model, as Tammy mentioned, as much as possible. We, do it virtually and then a quick walkthrough of the program to physically look at. But that kind of varies depending upon the area of the state you're at and the licensor's comfort level.
Thank you. Can we expect unannounced visits to make sure all these rules are being implemented?
Right now we're doing our monitoring visits virtually. And so that is as unannounced as they're getting right now. Catherine and Ellie, I don't know if you guys can speak at all to how unannounced those are.
Go ahead, Ellie, if you want.
Sure. So in an effort to be consistent whenever possible, we are doing some of our virtual visits unannounced, depending on the platform. We do understand that at times the virtual platform doesn't allow for it to be unannounced because you might have to have a certain application open. And there are certain times when, for safety related reasons, a visit might be done in person, but those are very specifically tied to some criteria that requires supervisor approval.
Yes.
When will the template be available, and how long will we have to implement it?
So it's going to be available early September. We are working on the final touch-ups for the English, and then we have a commitment to get those languages out together. So then we need to go through the translation process. And then from the time that it's available, you'll have 45 days to have your plan made. And I'll tell you that template just is going to walk you through each and every part of it. If you go through and answer the questions and then share it with your parents and support their understanding, you'll be good to go.
Okay. Can we make our own policy to require mask wearing for children 2 and up, or do we need to get parent permission?
You can. That is absolutely a business decision that you can make. We do have drafted a support document for this where you can use it as a permission slip with parents, or kind of an agreement with them. But if you would like to have your own policy to require it, you can do that, as long as children don't have the ability to remove the mask themselves and they're not sleeping with the mask. And anybody with a medical exception would need to be allowed to not wear it. And of course, no children under the age of 2.
Okay. I'm seeing a theme, and I think we answered it, but I can't keep up with what time we answered it and the number of new ones coming in. So I'm just going to ask it because I've seen it a few times. Do kids need to socially distance inside when they're wearing a mask?
You're going to do your best to provide activities that support children being separate from each other, but we know little children do not socially distance. They don't physically distance. On our website, we do have a document that gives tips and ideas about how to create that natural space between children. For example, providing them hula hoops to play within. Things like that will support them. So you want to spread activities out as much as you can, but we realize children are going to be near each other, and that's just the reality of being a child.
Okay. I see a question about getting support from the school district for kids who are doing remote learning, and I would just refer folks to touch base with their local school district or the Oregon Department of Education. So, do registered family have to wear protective gowns or clothing for health checks?
They do not. That's specific to certified center and recorded programs for the health check.
Okay. We are primarily an outside program. Do I and my staff have to wear masks on walks and while outside?
You really need to just look at the 6-foot distance. If everybody's staying 6 feet apart, then masks are not required. If that 6 feet distance cannot be maintained, then masks or face coverings are required.
Okay. In a CF home, if our group size is 16, can 3 staff work in the same room if the square footage is met? So 1 to 10 is 1 staff, 1 to 6 is another staff, and then there's 1 support teacher?
If you're meeting the ratios and your room has the square footage to support that many children, then yes. Sometimes in CF, you have one room that might have given you 10 children and another room that adds an additional 6 children. So you have to have all the spaces open up that are needed for your square footage and capacity. But yes, you can have the extra staff there if that's kind of the point of the question, to have the extra staff to support everybody. Catherine, do you have anything to add to that?
No, what I was just thinking is, I think what I'm understanding from the question is, does the square footage requirement apply to staff? And it does not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. If there is a note from a therapist or a church clergy, would that be acceptable for not wearing a mask?
So what the wording and the document, I think, says specifically doctor. I'm looking up the term right now. It does say a doctor's order. So I would say a doctor could be a psychiatrist because they have to go through medical school. But other than that, it would need to be a physician or a pediatrician, something along those lines, not a clergy or a therapist.
Okay. Where and how should face coverings be stored when the children eat or are physically distancing outside?
That's a really good question. We actually don't have anything that I recall in the guidance about it. Catherine, Ellie, does that ring a bell for you?
No, I mean, I think it needs to be within reach so that if you're finished eating, you can put it back on, or if the 6 feet can no longer be followed, you can put it back on, but it's not explicitly spelled out where you would keep it. There are lots of people who are wearing masks that pull up from sort of something that you wear around your neck. I've seen people who have masks who take one ear off and let it dangle like a long earring. You can put it in your pocket, but it's really up to you as long as it's accessible when you'll need it next.
Yeah, I think that in one part of the document it talks, although it's more about staff and that and kind of storing it in a bag, you know, you could even have kids decorate a cute little bag, you know, like if they're going to go outside and put it in there, you know, that's an idea too.
Agreed.
So I see that there's a question about whether or not the safety plan template is optional, and following the guidance, you do need to come up with a plan, but you don't have to use ELD's template. If you use ELD's template, you need to complete all sections of it, but as far as whether or not you use our plan or your own plan, that is your choice.
But if you do choose to use your own, you do have to make sure that you hit all of the elements as outlined in our plan.
Yes. With virtual visits, are we required to show the children? I have had parents very concerned about the fact that their children will be viewed on an internet-based platform for licensing and USDA.
Good question. We'll take that one forward. I haven't heard that one. Do you, Ellie and Catherine, do you have an initial gut? I mean, we do need to be able to monitor the children.
Yeah, I would tell you that we do need to be able to see the children in order to ensure, you know, safety and that kind of thing, but we're not recording. And that's where law really comes in with, we're not streaming it live to any platform that's publicly accessible. People who are teleworking are using Oregon Department of Education issued equipment that has protections, but we're not recording it. So we wouldn't like post it. And if somebody records, you know, that needs to be something that you're aware of, but there isn't a situation where your licensing specialist would be conducting a virtual visit and streaming it to another platform or recording it. So I do think we need to see the children. And if you need to respond to parents about whether or not they have concerns, I would refer them back to the fact that we are not recording or streaming the visit.
It's a really good point. And after I said, you know, let me think on that, you know, in terms of child safety, our job is to monitor the children. And so we do have to be able to see where they are, what they're playing with, where in the home they are, who they're with. So we do need to be able to see that.
Yeah, but I would totally agree with Ellie. We're not recording it in any way, so, you know, I wouldn't think that that would be an issue.
Okay. On page 23, it says that stable groups don't require distancing, but we keep talking about social distancing.
Right. So within your child's stable group, like I've said, you know, you want to do the best you can to give them activities that separate them out. But we recognize that children are going to be with each other. And so within that group, they are allowed to be with each other and play with each other. And then, you know, if you're in a center environment, that's especially critical because you've got multiple groups. So each of those groups need to be separate, along with the staff being separate and the staff not getting within 6 feet of another stable group. But within family childcare, that's less of an issue, and they absolutely can be together within their own group.
And on that note, are they allowed to share Legos if they're playing together?
So what it talks about in the activities section, I'm going to go to it so that I can get some actual live wording. It talks about limiting the sharing of materials and toys. So with Legos, what I would suggest is that everybody gets their own bin, their own collection of Legos, so that they're not sharing them. And then if you have a situation where sharing can't be avoided, then they need to use the hand sanitizer and wash their hands before moving to a next activity. But as much as possible, if you can provide them their own little bunch of the toy, that's much better than any sharing.
Okay. I'm reading the rules for drop off and pickup on page 15. It says parents or caregivers. Is that correct? Is it both parents and caregivers?
Well, what that's referring to is if the person who is the caregiver for the child doesn't happen to be their parent. So maybe it's a grandparent or somebody who has custody of them, is why that was written broadly to include both.
Do hands have to be washed when taking off masks? Could children take off in the bathroom to wash their hands, then go straight to the table to eat?
Oh, I feel like there is a section on there on hand washing when you're removing your mask. Ellie and Catherine, do you recall?
There is. Anytime you're touching the face of a child to assist them in putting their mask on or off. But I think the question was saying, can you combine it? Like, can you have kids use the bathroom, wash their hands, and then go eat, and then you're reducing the number of times they have to wash their hands?
I mean, I think that's reasonable. Do either of you see any reason why that wouldn't be?
Well, that seems reasonable.
Okay. What about staff that share an office that are in separate stable groups?
So what I believe the guidance talks about is that staff that are in separate groups, when they're at work, they need to maintain that 6 feet physical distance. So you might need to rearrange the office so that they're 6 feet apart. You might have to take shifts when they're in the office. I know that's personally what we're doing in the workspace, is we're taking shifts so that we're not in there at the same time, but they do need to maintain that 6 feet of distance. And I can tell you, there was a facility that they hadn't thought about the staff physically distancing. They really were only thinking about the children groups. And then sure enough, that virus went through all the staff because they were not separating themselves from each other. So they really do need to follow that.
Great. As per the USDA food program, we're not allowed to discriminate about who gets food first, but I don't have a table that's large enough to have the distance requirements, but I also don't want to discriminate by having separate meal times. What is the right thing to do, and will we be protected so we're not viewed as discriminating?
Catherine, do you have thoughts on that?
Sorry, I was typing, so I didn't get to hear the whole thing.
Just a question around the USDA not allowing people to discriminate with serving food and who gets food first, but not having a table large enough to serve all the children and maintain the social distancing. They were concerned about getting into trouble or violating a rule if they have different lunch times or serve children at different times.
I don't think it would be a violation of any rule, certainly for Office of Child Care, about that. I mean, you're trying, to be in compliance with the rules and keep children safe. So, certainly on our end, I don't see any issue with that.
Okay. I know that sandboxes are not allowed. How about dirt and shovels and scoops?
We haven't received any guidance that says those aren't allowed. It would go back to the sharing toys, and then if you, after kids use a toy, take it away, get it washed before the next child uses it. And if they do have to share toys, wash hands and sanitize afterwards. So if everybody has their own bucket and shovel, they're good to go.
We also received guidance that sandboxes in particular are really a growing ground for bacteria and other germs. And so part of the reason is the material itself with sand. So if each child has their own containers or bins with toys, do I have to sanitize it after the kids leave?
Yeah, so in the section that has, I believe it's table 5, the toys need to be cleaned and sanitized daily. Even if they have their own, it still needs to be cleaned at least once a day.
Okay. Let's see, do different stable groups have to enter and exit different doors still?
No, they don't. And I would say if you have, if you're a CF and you're wanting to keep your groups still separate, you split your group and you're wanting to keep operating that way, they can enter through the same door. They just need to have a path where they're not interacting with the other group.
So we have 2 daycare children with special needs and care, and they do not respond well to others in face coverings. They exhibit strong behaviors, including self-harm and stress. I have a stable group of 6 and 9 and have been together since April. What should I do?
So a couple things come to mind, and Ellie and Catherine, please jump in. I think that, you know, for children that have some special needs and some reactions, I think you want to look at the possibility of using face shields instead so that they can still see the face and get that interaction. If you have an extraordinary situation, you know, you can submit and talk to your licensing specialist and possibly submit for an exception. We would be looking for some really strong, I think, medical documentation for something like that. But I would try face shields first and see if that solves the problem. And Ellie and Catherine, if you have to add, please do.
Yeah, I don't think anything particularly to add other than, like I said, I think you can always, you know, the parents certainly could, you know, talk to the doctor and, you know, if they could get a note because of that, you know, that's a possibility.
Is there a requirement about what type of thermometer we use during the health screening?
There is not that I'm aware of. Any thermometer works.
Okay. Can siblings nap closer than 3 feet apart?
I don't know. What do you think, Ellie and Catherine? Siblings are just a little different, and in family childcare, it's very common for siblings to be together as opposed to in a center when they're usually in different classrooms.
I mean, I can just share my thoughts, but I don't know that we have clear guidance on that. We can combine siblings at the end of the day, but that doesn't remove their requirement to need to wear a mask. And also our exclusion policy says that if one child gets COVID, there's a certain set of rules if you've been exposed, and there's another set of rules if you are a presumptive positive case, and that those lines get blurred even within families, because we have seen that with mask wearing, sometimes even members of the same household, when they follow these practices, don't even spread it to each other. And so we are then exposing each stable group to that in childcare. But I also understand that the chances that a childcare aged child living in the same home is not probably touching the same doorknobs and the same car door and the same fork. So we might have to take that one back.
Yeah, I think
On the list.
yeah, the sibling questions are interesting, and I think it's an interesting dynamic, especially for family and childcare as opposed to centers. So I think we need to take those back.
On the list.
Okay. Are pods being regulated?
So anything that falls outside of what our exemptions allow for would be regulated. You know, if somebody is caring for more than 3 children and we received a report, we would follow up on that. If somebody was caring for, you know, if they fall into an exemption, then it's allowed to happen. If it doesn't fall into an exemption and we are notified of it, we would follow up with those programs.
Will we have access to this recording later? I'm trying to watch this and 6 children at the same time, and I'm missing many of the answers, and I'd like to review them later.
Yeah, absolutely. This is being recorded and will be posted. Erin, it's posted on our website or on Facebook or both? Do you know?
I'll track that down. I know at the very least, it'll be on Facebook.
Okay.
I'll touch base with Melanie on that.
Okay, thank you.
Do we need to file an exception to ELD for a mask not being worn if we have the documentation for why it's not being worn on hand?
If you have a doctor's note, that's all you need to have, is have that on file. You don't have to request an exception from us.
Okay. Let's see.
And I do see a question, Ellie, about our face shields okay to use without a face covering. Yes, face shields are one of your options. So you can do a face covering, which can be a mask or a bandana or, you know, those cloth items, or you can do a face shield. Both are allowed.
Okay. I see that if someone is exposed to a positive or presumptive care person, their quarantine may not be shortened by getting a negative test or by getting a note from a medical provider. Is that correct?
That is correct, and it's because of the incubation period of the virus. So while they might test negative on day 3, the incubation period is 14 days, so they have to do that full 14 days.
Okay. What distance does the sink inside need to be from the front door to use the sink instead of the hand sanitizer?
You know, we really don't have specific guidance. I'm looking to see what the wording in the document actually says. And that is in our check-in section. Drop off and pick up. Okay, provide hand hygiene station at the entrance. So I would say, you know, we don't say. So if it's not a bathroom that you have before you can walk in and touch anything else, then do hand sanitizer. But if you have a bathroom where you can walk in and you can go to that bathroom and wash your hands before you go to the rest of the house, because I know a lot of houses maybe have a half bathroom right inside the door. If you don't have it right inside the entrance, then you would go the hand sanitizer route.
Okay. Do family members have to check in and check out during business hours?
No. So there's information in the record keeping section that family members that are over the age of 12 are assumed to be present in the home for contact tracing purposes, so you don't even have to log them as being in the home. Children 12 and under who are in your childcare, you want to go ahead and log them because they aren't assumed to be in the home, because sometimes your own provider's own children will go somewhere else during the day.
Okay. Do we have to provide masks for children, or are parents responsible for that?
You know, the requirement is that children wear a face covering. How you work that out with your parents is for your business decision. I would suggest probably having some backups. And I know that I've heard a lot that providers are concerned that their parents aren't going to provide them. And then I think you're going to have some firm conversations with your parents if they're not providing what they need for their child, whether it's a good fit for them. But the requirement is that children do have it. So Ellie, I see that we are at 2:29. So let's do one more question.
Are parents and children allowed to bring anything from home, blankets or meals, food, snacks, toys?
Meals are allowed. If they're bringing their own blanket, I believe what it says in the cleaning section is that bedding needs to be laundered weekly or when it's soiled. So you would want to make sure to send those blankets home with the children every week so that they can get washed if you're not doing the washing for them. Toys, you would need to make sure, I would say, if a toy, we don't have anything in the guidance about it, but I'm thinking if a toy enters the facility, I think you should clean it before it's in the facility so that you know it has the same level of cleaning of everything that you bring. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is prevent a spread of a very serious disease. So the more measures that you can take to tighten up your circle and to not have a lot of things entered in from outside, the better off your group is going to be. Ellie and Catherine, do you have anything to add to that before we finish up?
Nope.
I don't, but I did have one more theme question that I'm just going to ask and answer myself really quick because it's so important. There's a question about, because the groups are stable, once you do drop in and drop off and all of that, teachers can take their face coverings and face shields off, right? And the answer is no. They need to continue to wear their face coverings, face shield, or face mask. So it is not only for when you're doing check-in, it is during the rest of the day. But that's it.
Thank you, Ellie. Well, I thank you all for joining us today. I thank you for the great questions. You're a smart group and certainly had some stumping questions that we'll work on. I wanted to point you to a couple of resources. In the guidance document is this link to the county status map. So if you go into this link, and I know it's in the guidance document too, this will show you where your county is in terms of whether they're in phase 1, phase 2, whether they are on a watch list, or if they're in baseline, which right now nobody is, so we're gonna hope it stays that way. And then also, you know, we need to hear from you. We want to hear from you. So if you have any additional questions, your licensor is always a great resource, and we're working hard at supporting our staff so that they can support you with those questions. But if you have something that you would like to email to us, you can use this email address at provider contact at ODE or at state.or.us, but also we want to hear ideas. If you have ideas of some support documents that would be helpful to you when you're talking to parents, let us know. Send us an email and let us know. Or if you have some ideas about some adjustments that need made in the guidance that would make it easier to implement, please let us know, and we're taking all of that forward and into consideration. But for today, I thank you very much for your time and appreciate the effort that you're putting in to keep our children safe. And I think that the effort that childcare providers have been making is demonstrated in the fact that, you know, we've had about 60 cases in childcare, not 60 cases, 60 childcare statewide that have had some positive COVID cases. And I think that's really a testament to the hard work you guys are doing. So thank you all and have a wonderful day.
Bye.